bet you're the same. A phone call suddenly turns into, hey, what are you doing on Wednesday? Fancy fishing? That's exactly what's happened today. I've got up early, I've headed up the 303 and had a sportsman's breakfast. Jodie in Colorado, you know exactly what that is now. And some coffee, and I'm just walking downstream, having a look at the river. It's looking in great nick. I'm early. Anyone who knows me knows I'm always early. I can't help it, particularly when it comes to fishing. I just get too excited about our little pastime and what we do, where we go. Fishing somewhere a little bit different as well, so that's fun. I'm going to be meeting Jim Williams, who's a guest on the podcast, who's in the second ever episode of that. So I'm going to do some fishing with him. I think Warren might turn up a little bit later. I think he's managed to sort some things out with his busy schedule and can join us a little bit later, perhaps this afternoon sometime. So that's going to be fun. Water looks great. It's clear. Perhaps we might even see some rising fish. I've been at home, been fishing some of Peter Hayes and Don Stasica's patterns, sort of pop-up emergers, in the film emergers, with great success recently. So I'm looking forward to trying, I guess, where a lot of them were born on the chalk streams or the limestone streams of Derbyshire as well. So I'm going to give those a go. I'm looking forward to catching up with Jim. I've not fished with him for quite some time. We speak pretty regularly, but I've not fished with him for a while, so I'm looking forward to that. The sun's shining. There's a little bit of wind, just a little bit. There'd been some rain at home on my drive up, but everything's looking pretty good at the moment. I plan on staying relatively late tonight, fish hard, enjoy some good company, and we'll see what we can find on the river today. I'm Pete Tigers. This is the Fly Culture Podcast. I walked to the bottom of the beat and tried to keep, you got to sort of walk near the river, but I've tried to keep back as far as I possibly can. I've seen a few fish. I actually spooked some muntjac deer as well, which came out in front of me, which I don't know who was more surprised or more alarmed, but I don't think I shrieked anyway. I've seen a few fish. Most of the ones that I've seen have been pretty hard on the bottom, but just as I was getting to the very bottom, I saw a smallish fish rise up and take something. I didn't see what it was. It looked pretty small. There are some really, really small midge on the water, so I don't know if that's what it's picked up. But that was higher in the water. That was the one exception. The added bonus for me as well, the stream that I spend most of my time fishing in the West Country doesn't have any grayling in it, so I'm sort of keeping an eye out for that. I like, as you know, if you're a regular listener, it's no snobby thing or anything like that, but I like to try and fish a dry fly where I can. But the first pot that I can see is a little bit deeper, and I'm going to try perhaps a nymph in there. I think I can see something hard on the bottom. It would be really cool if it were a grayling, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm fishing my glass rod that I got from Warren at McCarthy Rodworks, so I'm going to give that a go. And it'll be interesting to see how it copes with the nymph as well. I've only fished it with a dry, and it'll be interesting to see how it copes with that. So that's going to be an interesting process. I'm sort of spending a bit of time just watching. I'm looking for signs of bugs, just calming down the heart rate just a little bit as well, because I'm excited and I just want to be in the right frame when I step into the river, because often when I'm like this, the first cast probably goes in a tree or something silly like that. So I'm going to take a little bit of time, see if the river gives me any clues, but I think my first move will be to tie on a nymph. I'm sort of looking while I'm speaking to you down into the water. I haven't got Polaroids on. I've got them on the top of my cap at the moment, but the water's so clear that I can see without them, to be honest. So I'm looking for any signs of fish down there. I think I can see something, but I'm not 100% sure. But the pot is about, I don't know, it must be about 3 or 4 feet deep. So yeah, my inclination's to throw something in there just to see if anyone's home. I'm not going to use any indicator or anything. If you listen to the podcast that I did in Italy, I really, really enjoyed just fishing the nymph old school style. It may be that I get a chance to see a reaction from a fish. If not, I'm going to either watch the leader or I'm going to watch the fly line and see what I can come up with and see if anyone's home in that part. The next pull up was where I saw the fish rise as well. So I've sort of this is sort of a limber up for me. I'm not expecting anything out this first little spot. Then there's a bunch of trees that come out that comes round into that next pool where I saw the fish rise. So it may be that I fling a nymph just in this first one just to see. I'm interested, like I say, to see how I get on with the nymph on this rod as well, see if that works. I've got some nymphs with me, so I'll try those. The leader I've got's about 11-12 feet long, something of that sort of magnitude, so I'll see how I get on with that. It's what I've been fishing at home. There's about 4 pound on the end of that. I've got, as I said, it's a 7-foot 3-weight glass rod. I lost a really good fish at home, not due to the rod, because I was really impressed how well it cushioned these softer rods, how that they actually allow you to lean into fish just that little bit more. By soft, I don't mean a noodle either. It's S-glass, so it recovers really, really quickly, but bends nice and deeply as well. And I lost a nice fish that went right into a root structure. I was probably a little bit tough on it, trying to keep it out of there, because I could see how it was going to play out, and it didn't play out that way. It came off before then, but it was a good fish, one of those ones that you don't see. If it were a sea trout, I'd probably have expected it to leap around a little bit. It did none of that. It just stayed deep the whole time, and I could feel that thump, thump, thump of the fish. But that was another day. This is today. Like I say, I'm going to see. While I've been talking to you, I've just been looking down into the water. I'd sort of convinced myself there's a fish there, and if I was a fish, that's where I'd be hanging out. So, yeah, I'm going to chuck a nymph in and see how I get on. This has been fun so far. So the first pool, I had a tiny wild brown trout on a nymph. As I walked up through the pool, it's only a small little pot, and I saw a nicer fish on the edge of the run, which I hadn't spotted. Came into the next area, and it's not that deep. It's just over shin, knee deep. And I could get pretty parallel with the fish, so I could see, and I thought I had saw a grayling or two. And it turned out it was them, and I gave them the dry a couple of times, in the surface emerger from Peter and Don, and then went really small. I went for a 20, but there was no interest, and I could see these little puffs of dust as the grayling were taking nymphs from the bottom. So again, I tied on a really small pheasant tail with a pink bead on it, and it's a really interesting spot that sometimes the fish move into the darker water where it's shaded and then into the lighter, and sometimes it's just instinct. I wasn't 100% sure what happened, but it felt as though it was the right spot, and I lifted into the fish, saw the shake of that grayling, and it was a grayling, probably a pound and a bit, something like that. Shook 2-3 times and then came off. But these little things are little moral victories. I've barely moved in 15-20 minutes, and I've just been watching. There's been some smaller trout, and I wanted to leave those alone, let them get on doing their thing, and I'm just really enjoying trying to spot these fish. But I decided not to use the nymph that I'd been using previously, because it was about 3 mil, something like that. And with the water being so shallow, there's a fair bit of weed as well, these ranunculus channels, that I was worried that the fly landing might spook the fish a little bit in such skinny water, and also that it might get caught up a little bit. So it looked as though the choice was okay. The execution could have been slightly better. I think it was just, as I said, it was more instinct than anything else, but it seems to be going okay at the moment. And I think I can see another fish slightly further up. I've seen a fish rise as well. This pool's quite a long one. I would say it's 50, pool's probably the term on a chalk stream, but a break in the flow a little bit. But probably 20-30 feet upstream of me, there's a bush that comes out towards the edge of the river, and I've seen a couple of fish move there. I looked as I was walking down, and it was a fair bit deeper as well, so I'm sort of hoping that I can tempt somebody up, but also I think possibly fish will feel pretty happy in there, and it may be that I do mix and match, so I may look at the surface, I might wait for a little bit. I guess, I said I was about 40 minutes early for Jim, but I don't want to fish too fast, so I'm sort of taking my time, but enjoying this aspect to it as well. But before we go into the section where I'd seen the odd fish rise, they're not steady risers. They're every now and again that something happens. I've been scanning the water really closely, and that's one of the reasons I went for that really small dry as well, that it felt right, probably because I couldn't see much to go at. But I'm going to keep watching, keep working up, and perhaps get to see Jim shortly too. So it's really nice to be joined by my good friend Jim Williams. He was guest, if you go all the way back to 230 something, might be 240 something, I can't remember how many of these I've done now, podcast where we talked about life in fishing and some other stuff, and we stay in pretty regular touch actually. But Jim, it's great to have you back, and I was trying to figure out the last time we fished. It's been a little while, hasn't it?
Yeah, I would say 2 years on the tour with yourself and Warren, at least. Yeah, definitely that.
It was really, really good fun there as well, and you were picking them up on a caddis. I remember you almost treading on a salmon as well as you walked upstream. That's how stealthy that you actually are as well. So that worked really well. And then, of course, you've come straight back in here. We've seen a rising fish. You've covered it, and it was in a really tricky spot as well, but managed to get the cast into the right spot. And with F-fly, fish rose. Thanks very much indeed. It's lovely when things like that happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're the one that spotted it, to be truthful. I think I was facing away from the water at the time, Pete, looking up at you on the bank, trying to tie your fly on. But you spotted it, I cast it, I nailed it. I think it should have been your fish, because you've been here much longer than I was this morning. I've come in at the back end, barged you out of the water, and decided to have that one myself.
You can have that one, mate. You can have that one on me. And it's a lovely, we're not naming where we are today, but it's a lovely little stream, isn't it? And the ability to spot and see these fish is pretty neat, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm to be honest, I'm not even wearing Polaroids. I mean, these are just clear glass glasses I've got on, but the water clarity is just crystal clear. And you're not really needing to peer too much and dark in order to see where these fish lie. The water's just fantastic quality. It really is at the minute, especially with the weather that we've been having. And albeit we've not had any rain recently, let's just say in the last week or 2 weeks, there's a great head of water on this particular river at the minute. It looks really good.
Yeah, and we talked about that we haven't fished together for a little bit, and it was mildly ironic that as Jim walked down the river, I was wearing a pair of glasses trying to thread a size 20, and time does march on, time does catch up with us, but we're going to see what we can do. As I said, even from the last segment that I recorded, I've probably moved 20 feet. And that's been it. And it's been lovely to see. It's a slightly deeper pot. Fish probably feel a little bit more confident there as well, that they can come up out of a spot and, as Jim termed it, nail the fly. And that's exactly what it did without any hesitation. And both as former guides, it's just when we saw it splash, that's a big one. And you can't help it as a guide when you see those moments, do you? See that fish splash around and you sort of revert to a former life for a few moments, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And interesting enough, looking up and down the river as we are now, there's no fly life visible, to be truthful. So I think what they are taking is just something just under the surface. So perhaps an emerger. So choosing something that's sitting right on the surface seems to be the call for the morning. There's quite a bit of a breeze, albeit we've got a lot of protection from the surrounding trees, bushes and the like. I think it's going to be a great morning.
Yeah, it looks all right. They've stopped rising in here, hardly surprisingly. We thought, for me at home, certainly at least, that if the water's disturbed, that's it, you can forget about it. But it seems to me that chalk stream fish are slightly different. I suppose they got weed to hide in, so they can just dart into that and wait until things feel more comfortable for them again, and off they go. But I haven't seen a fish rise there. I was tying something on when Jim hooked into that one, so I'm going to tie a fly back on, have a look. Looks as though F-fly is probably the pattern, and so I'm probably going to whack one of those on as well and see how we get on. But it looks as though that fish, hardly surprisingly, has probably calmed things down for a little bit. It might be a little bit later we have a wander down here. In my limited experience here, this is a nice little spot for rising fish, and I think the depth of the pool certainly helps. I think it will be a combination of looking for rising fish, and perhaps if we spot a fish that's a little bit more anchored on the bottom, that we might whack a nymph on and go from there. But a really, really good start to the day, and yeah, fun. We've been catching up, we've been talking a lot, so there's probably been half a dozen casts and talking about life in general, which I'm sure we'll share some of this with you at some stage as well. But I think what do you reckon? Do we walk up a little bit, see what we can find?
I think so. Let's go wander.
Just fishing the head of the pool, and again, it's quite deep, and we almost walked past it, but thought we better put a nymph on and see how we get on. There's been nothing there, but one of the interesting things is that the river's is shallowing up, and it's only again going to be probably shin deep, weed everywhere. There's some clear patches where we might see some fish, and I know we sometimes talk about two rods, but I think and carrying, say, a nymph rod and a dry fly rod, but I think one of the nice things about one and switching between the two, it does mean that your leader becomes progressively shorter, but what you also do is spend a bit of time changing. So when you're sitting still and changing fly, you're able to observe things, you're resting the pool a little bit, and it gives you a great opportunity to be able to do that. So yeah, I can see the arguments for carrying two rods, but I kind of like the one that allows me to rest fishing, observe things, and something might happen while I'm changing the flies. It might determine my fly pattern, it might change things up a little bit, and we'll see from there. But I think we're going to probably walk upstream through the river here, because we can wade here as well, and see if we can find some fish. We walked back downstream for a little while where we started, because there's been a heavy downstream wind. We've sort of done a mixture of stuff of looking for rising fish. I've tied on a nymph at a grayling, which I managed to frighten off. And there was a pretty heavy downstream wind. So we thought if there were rising fish, if we headed down, there's a little bend in the river and where we'd seen the fish rising earlier and where Jim had caught his first one as well, that might be a good chance. So we're sort of sitting down, waiting to see if anything's going to happen. Jim's had another fish. We saw a couple of fish rising in a pool, and he managed to catch one of those expertly, which was fantastic news. But we were saying in the introduction when Jim and I first started talking that we'd not fished together for a while, but I guess there's been a reason for that as well. And it's a nice and interesting story to hear about from somebody who's been a guide. He's one of the first full-time guides, along with Nick Hart at the time when guiding and instruction was really seriously starting to get going, and that's being carried on now by the likes of Andy Buckley, Stuart Collingswood up in Scotland as well, who are doing great work, and others that are doing great work. But Jim and Nick, for me, certainly were people I looked up to when I first came into the industry and started working for Nick, of course. And we've been reminiscing on old times, and when we ran the online magazine Eat Sleep Fish, and Jim and I just sat on the same river as this a number of years ago now. It must be over 10, 12 years ago now. It must be longer than that, thinking about it. But Jim's been around the industry for a long time, as I said, as a master instructor, guide, and brand manager as well, and has left the industry and now is been lovely, just sort of talking about, reminiscing about things that we've done in the industry, fishing shows, those sorts of things. But yeah, you sort of had a bit of a break from fishing, really, didn't you?
Yeah, primarily as a result of my father passing away in 2019. being, dare I say, a mentor, if anything else, other than a father, obviously. But I lost the love, I lost the passion for it. I really did. He was my fishing partner, for want of a better word, along with some close friends like yourself. But I just didn't care about fishing at all for a good few years, and bizarrely turned to marathon running. And I know one person can relate to that, which is Jim Curry, who's still doing it to an obscure, obscene level. Super fit guy and a good friend. But yeah, I just lost the will to want to fish. Like I mentioned to you this morning, Pete, I have no desires to go out fishing by myself. It doesn't inspire me in any way, shape or form. I'd prefer, like we are today, enjoying a river and a fish and banter with somebody else. I don't find solace in my own company, to be truthful. I get enough during the day in many other guises other than fishing, and I'd far rather be out in the water with somebody else enjoying it than by myself, to be truthful. And because I lost my dad in 2019, part of that was gone, and that was one of the reasons I just put my fishing kit away. And it really didn't bother me. I didn't feel guilty about not going fishing, albeit it was almost like a lifelong passion. Now I feel better for that break, and it was almost like a 2 to 3 year hiatus, really. And I feel far better now as a result of it, coming back to fishing as I have done in the last year or so. And I enjoy it more. I far more enjoy it more. And that was one of the reasons, really, why it went to the back burner. I just put my heart and soul into something else, and that just happened to be running. And although I do it less so now, I still do quite a bit, because now I'm getting back into fishing as once was, and thoroughly enjoying it more.
That's great to hear. And like you say, we've had a good morning just sharing the river, really, and taking it in turns, and you have a go type thing, which is fun. Was it difficult? Were you aware that you'd missed fishing? Because of course you were doing, like you say, the marathons and the running and everything else. Was that step back into fishing a gradual one? And did you sort of go again and think, yeah, actually this is okay? Or did it take a little bit more than that for you to want to do things like we're doing today?
It took a lot longer than just stepping back straight into it. I had all the kit. That never went away, but I was just never inspired to want to get the kit out. And to be honest, if I hadn't spoken to you about this place and managed to get hold of the availability to fish this place, I'd still probably be not that inspired to get into fishing. I'd done a bit of teaching, still do occasionally, but that passion for fishing was just gone in all intents and purposes. And it's taken having somewhere to go, knowing that I can go there when I want. Not that I have to, it's just that I can. And if I can go there with somebody of a like mind, then I'll enjoy those days and future days to come, just as much as I did when I was doing it sort of full time, as it were. The necessity to do it now is for want of enjoyment and nothing else. I have no guilt for having not fished. I don't think I've missed anything, because I've just been concentrating on other stuff. But now I'm back into it, and every time that I come back to it, I feel like I'm a bit more inspired to do it more often.
That's great to hear. And you say you're doing a little bit of teaching and stuff. And is that in a different way? Is that inspiring in a different way? Because as somebody who doesn't really do it at all now, I don't really miss it in any way, shape or form. But are you finding that's part of rehabilitation is probably the wrong word, but not far off it in bringing you back into fly fishing? Is that a different angle to ignite that passion again?
Yeah, one thing that I found that it does is because, as I said, the solitude is not for me in fishing. When we were guides, you and I, you're guiding for somebody with somebody, so you're spending all day with people, and you're having fun for whatever reason that may be. The banter, the fishing's fantastic, the fishing's awful, whichever that may be. A lot of my time was spent in the company of others, and the good thing about doing whatever bit of teaching or guiding I may do now by helping others it brings me back to that accompaniment and the enjoyment. I see, as much as I get out the enjoyment of watching you catch a fish today, I would then learning a cast perhaps, or even catching a fish in a location. I find that inspiring, and that for me it just brightens that flame, for want of a better word. And as I say, I'm more enjoying it now than I've done for a long time.
That's great to hear. And I was just thinking about what you were saying about enjoying standing next to somebody in a river and the banter, the conversation. Do you think part of that is also a function of having done that for so many years on the river as a guide as well, so that you're used to having company on the river, and so it kind of in some respects feels kind of natural as well?
Yeah, I think, well, you can't as a guide or as an instructor be quiet. I think the very nature of the job fuels you. Sometimes you've got to be understanding of how much information or guiding you give somebody, just so as you're not blowing their brains. And I'm sure we've all done that as a guide. But yeah, it's quite natural for me to have conversations with people. And interestingly enough, I find it easier to talk about fishing to somebody who either wants to do it, enjoys it, or knows about it, than somebody who knows nothing, because the commonality there is the inspiration of wanting to go fishing, or you've already experienced those locations, or you've experienced a particular fish. I'm sure, like yourself, you could probably talk somebody to death when that fishing or whatever topic comes up to do with fishing, location, tactics, cast, whatever that may be. But that's what I do enjoy.
And for me, saying that you hadn't fished for a while, and I said when you started casting, I said the casting chops are still there, and magnificent controlled loops. And did it mean for you when you were on this hiatus that you didn't even go out and cast a fly rod? You just left them and that was it?
Yeah, didn't touch them. Didn't pick up a rod, didn't set up a rod. It was so far at the back of my mind that it was, I think you go through, an analogy would be, I went to school, went from this year to that year, you move on, you go into your working life, your career, and what have you. And some stuff just sticks with you. And, for that, the thing that has been the longevity from whenever I started fishing to now is fishing. And I always felt I could, some years were busier than others. I always felt I could just leave it and pick it back up. And it's, dare I say, it's like riding a bike. You may fall off, but you never forget how to ride a bike. You just get back on it until you can ride it as well as you did previously. And fishing was that way. Fishing was exactly the same for me. My eyesight is shot, and you can attest to that this morning. You get older and you lose the faculties, common sense. I can barely remember the name of any fly, to be truthful. But that doesn't matter. When I was guiding, funnily enough, it concerned me because you almost felt like you had to be that encyclopedia. Now I couldn't care less, honestly. As long as I can stick a fly on, I do understand tapers and stuff, and as long as I can keep that fly where I need it to go in whatever cast I can make to get it out there, that's all that matters. Everything else doesn't. I don't care about the rest of the stuff. And to be honest, if I catch a fish, that's fantastic. If I don't, whether we caught today or not was totally irrelevant. It doesn't matter to me. It really doesn't matter to me at all. Just being out in this environment, in these conditions, other than the wind, which is picking up terribly, is great. Absolutely great.
And do you find what you said is something really interesting to me? And again, somebody who worked in teaching people to be better or help them be better fishermen, better casters. And you said about, throwing off those shackles, encyclopedic shackles, and throwing those away. And I found likewise, because I don't know if you were the same, but did you ever feel undue pressure when you're fishing? So because of what you did, it had to be right. And, we had an example today that I got caught in a tree behind me and just said, God, and I said to you, I used to be good at this. And so I don't analyse things in quite the same way, but I enjoy my fishing more as a result. Did you ever feel those signs of pressure as being a fishing guide and instructor when you're actually fishing for pleasure?
Always. Yeah. Yeah, always. I think you always had to be. I think it was right to be better than the guy that you were teaching. Not necessarily in every aspect, but if somebody was paying you to teach them something, you had to be better than they were at what they wanted to be taught. And it was just, I think, it instills. I'll name a person who is an amazing advocate of always wanting to be the best they can be, and that is Jim Fern. You know, the guy, I've never seen a guy with a double hander cast like Jim Fern can cast. And every time I have a conversation with Jim, he is the advocate of always wanting to be on top of your game. He's still very much, an ambassador in the industry, and has been for a long, long time. I do not need that anymore. As much as it's inspiring for people like Jim, and Jim's a major inspiration for casting, I don't need that for what I do. Because I'm no longer a full-time guide. I do very little of it, as I say, only occasionally. And I pick and choose what I do to make sure that what I do, I'm good at. Outside of that, I'll just do the fishing I want to fish in the way that I want to fish it. And it doesn't concern me overly much. But yeah, there was a pressure. There was always a pressure because you are, I suppose, you're the teacher, you've got a student. And it should never be the other way about. Your student shouldn't be teaching the teacher. It should have never been that way. So you're always pressured to make sure that you were good at what you knew, and it was to the best of your ability. And then you shared that to whomever was using your services for the day, hour, whatever.
I think they're very valid points, and the pressure thing is kind of interesting. I've often said about people expect you to catch the most fish because you're a fishing guide. And if you do, well, you were supposed to do that. And if you don't, you were shit. So it was a pressure in a different way. And it can easily make you question why you want to do it, or actually say, do I actually want to do this? Because I know I'm going to feel pressure throughout the day. And then at the end of it, question, well, should I have really done this? Because it wasn't the fun that it's supposed to be. And I think for me, stepping away from it makes it so much more fun. I do not give a crap if I get stuck in a tree. And as you well know, we fish with some of the best people, and some of the best people get stuck in trees. There isn't this massive step up, is there? There's not a gigantic difference between us, is there? We're just people who go out and try and enjoy what we're doing, try and trick a few trout or grayling, and sometimes it goes to plan, and it may be a lot of the time it does, but there are times that it doesn't, and we get hung up, and it doesn't matter. And I've noticed since I don't do it professionally anymore, like I said, I just don't care, and that pressure seems to have gone completely from my shoulders. And it's lovely sitting with you now, and we're not even really looking at the river. I've kept half an eye out, and I've seen one fish move, but again, they're not on it hub. But it doesn't matter, does it?
No, it doesn't at all. Once you've thrown those, as you described it, once you've thrown those shackles off, and it's amazing how little you need to do to enjoy your day. As you just mentioned, we just sat on the side of the bank, just half watching the water, half not, and I'm pulling plants out of the ground here, bits and bits of grass just to twist and chew. And it doesn't bother me. Years ago, I had to be in the water now, and I had to have got here at an early hour and stay here to a late hour. If we decided to call it a day now, Pete, we've had 2 or 3 hours of fantastic fishing. And I don't need any more or any less than that. And I don't need to catch fish nowadays. There's not a pressure. I don't put the pressure on myself to catch fish. As long as I'm enjoying what I'm doing, whether I'm doing it or not. That's where it is for me now.
So we walk back up, and Warren's come away from his rod building to join us, and we've headed upstream just a little bit. We heard Warren call that he'd landed a fish, but conditions are a bit different now, aren't they, Jim? They're a bit cooler, so you've got your jacket on as well. We've changed our flies a little bit, except Jim, because his winning one has stayed on. I've gone a bit bigger to try and bring something up, but it's a bit cooler now, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I'm not going to say it's freezing, but it's freezing. Yeah. It is cold.
Warren, we heard that call, so nice little start for you as well.
Yeah, I think the only chance to catch it on the dry today is going to be pinging something hairy in the shallower riffles, just sort of targeting the smaller fish, I think, really, just to try and bring them up, which worked, which is good.
And it's nice to get you away from rod building, right?
Yes, first time I've been out since we were out on Dartmoor, one reason or another. Yeah, I do seem to be consumed by time at the workbench at the moment, which is fantastic, exactly how I wanted it.
And you're enjoying it?
Yeah, absolutely loving it. Yeah, it's been a great start. I say on the back of the podcast, I've had several orders come in, which is really exciting, and it's just setting to and getting them built for people. But it's great. It's great.
And it looks like the weather's, as said, the rain's just about holding off. We've had a few drops. There's not much hatch at all. I don't know if everyone's shaking their head. We've not really seen a lot, and Jim's, like I said, the CDC has worked. What have you got, Warren? Is that a caddis of some sort? Yeah, Retyrus edge. I've got a small stimulator on as well, so we're trying to bring fish up rather than target rising fish, because we've not really seen any right now. So I think that's probably going to be the scheme. We're going to work upstream. We just, lunch again, it encapsulates what we'd been talking about earlier, and we were sitting all in the boots of our cars near each other, eating stuff, talking fishing, talking rods, casting rods, that sort of stuff. And it's those little bits that are just as much fun as the fishing itself. Just walked upstream a little bit, and we talked about the wind, and I'm sort of standing mid-river. There's a load of trees behind me and some trees to my left side, and there's a reed bed that almost comes down the middle of the river, and there's some flat water in between. Flipped the stimulator into that and managed to catch a fish, and then just risen another one. I'm just waiting just to see if I can bring it up. I've seen, fun enough, a sizable caddis come down the river as well, so maybe I'm on the right pattern, and also just a spent mayfly as well. So it might be the plan. I'm just going to wait this out, see if he comes back up again. But yeah, that's been kind of fun. One of the nice things about this, I often talk about how you fish differently when there's two of you, because you're probably wading up the river together. But I found this new thing, three of you. Three of you is really cool, because two of you can sit talking about stuff while the other person goes off fishing for a bit. And that's what we've done this afternoon. It's been really, really good fun. Just take it in turns. Again, it comes down to choosing your fishing friends really carefully. So if you've got somebody competitive, this probably isn't going to work. But we've just taken it in turns, handed rods over. So we'll have a go here, have a go here. And it's worked really well. And we've walked a fair way, and we've walked back down to the bottom just to see where we started, if there was a fish rising, and lo and behold, we saw it looks like a grayling pushed a bit of water, and Jim's got into position. Warren and I are just sort of sitting here. Jim's got one of Warren's flies on, and he's not changed his fly all day, and it's worked just fine for him. And we're waiting to see if he's going to catch that fish. But it's a really fun way to fish, actually, 3-up. So it does work really, really well, and gives it just a slightly different angle. So you don't get out of that fishing zone we often talk about on here, that you just can concentrate while you sit and catch up with a friend and talk about things. And we the three of us sat down here together just talking about fishing and the fishing world and those sorts of things, and then waited for that fish to rise, and lo and behold, it showed itself. But it doesn't seem to want to bite the fly just at the moment, but it doesn't matter really. So it's quite a long drive back for me to Devon, and thought we'd add as podcast guests. Both of them have been, my guys we've been fishing with today have been podcast guests, but that was before that we had the playlist that's on Spotify. So Warren, you said you had one for us. So what's your song for the Fly Culture playlist?
It's a random one that came up with a Spotify search on the way down here, and it's Billy Bragg, Levi Stubbs' Tears.
Very good. Jim, what have you got that I can add and listen to on the way home?
Black and White Town, the Doves.
Perfect choices, fellas. Thank you so much. So it's been an afternoon session that we're sitting watching now, and it's 5:30 or so. There's caddis hatching. There's plenty on the water, but you thought you might have seen a few more fish coming up, perhaps as they were ascending. But it's been relatively quiet. We've taken our shots where we can. We sort of split up a little bit, just a pool each really, above and below each other. I think Warren's risen some fish. I heard Jim shout out that he had somebody come have a look as well, and I went back to have a look for a grayling that as soon as I cast over it, it shot off again, so clearly didn't want me to play today, but that didn't matter. But that's been fun, hasn't it?
It's been great fun. Yeah, really enjoyed it. It's a shame it's not been a very impactful afternoon, actually. I think it's probably going to be better at dusk. I feel with the amount of fly life that's on the water, a dusk rise is in the making.
I'm almost tempted to hang around just that little bit longer, but Warren, I got a confession. I did hang a nymph on because I saw a grayling that was hard on the bottom there. There was no way it was going to come up. I did flick a dry over it, but it wasn't going to eat it. And then, of course, the nymph landed and the fish bolted anyway. It wasn't particularly deep water, but it was an okay fish that was worth having a look at. But that is my confessional.
He's bolted in protest, I'd imagine, not anything else. No, it's been what a lovely afternoon to catch up. I mean, I haven't caught up with you two guys for a while, especially Jim. It's just been a really nice social, to be honest. Plenty of sitting around and nattering with the occasional cast thrown in. Great fun.
And so that's it. I've got the long drive back to make, so I'm probably going to do that. We'll walk up the river. I'm sure we'll be keeping half an eye out for some rises. And that's what this has been about a whole lot more than, of course, just the fish. It's not been one of those epic days, but it doesn't mean it hasn't been an epic day because we didn't catch loads of fish. And the fish that we've caught have been hard and well earned. So we're pleased with that. It's been fun to fish some fun tackle as well. So Warren's got a bamboo rod, I've got one of his glass rods, and Jim's got a graphite rod. So we've mixed things up and it's been fun comparing and contrasting about those as well, and just catching up. And as I always say on here, if there's someone that you haven't seen in a while, perhaps give them a call and see how they're doing, perhaps see if they want to do fishing. And I can recommend 3 people on the river. 3 isn't a crowd on a river, but choose those friends very, very carefully. But if you do it, you can have an awesome day. Well, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. As ever, there'll never be any charge for these. It's just fun to talk fly fishing. Of course, there'll be plenty more of these coming very, very soon. But thank you so much for listening and spending the day on the river with us today. I've enjoyed having you along.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.